Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Genshin video. For today's video, I'll be splitting it up into two topics. The first part will cover stats, which I'll go through pretty quickly because I find most of it pretty straightforward for the most part. There's only a few stats I think really needs explaining. Then as for the second part, is going to be like an introduction to artifacts, and I'm going to give you guys a guideline on how to build your main DPS character for the early to mid game. Sounds good? Alright, let's get started. So I'm going to go down the list for the stats. Max HP is self-explanatory, it's your character's health. Do note that there are some characters that have skills that scale off of HP, so make sure that you check your character's skills through the talent page. Now attack isn't as straightforward as you'd think. There's a lot of little things to go over regarding attack, but I'm going to talk more about that later on. For now, I'm just going to say that attack is the basis of everything offensively. Defense is just defense. The more defense a character has, then the less damage they shall receive. Now, Elemental Mastery. This is the one that seems to confuse a lot of people, so I'm going to try my best to explain it as clear and concise as possible. Elemental Mastery comes into play when you trigger reactions, such as Swirl, Melt, Vaporize, and etc. These elemental reactions scale off of Elemental Mastery, okay? That said, characters that are played as a support, such as how I use my official or Shanling, when I say play as a support, what I mean is I switch to them just to use one skill, then I would switch back to my main DPS afterwards, once their quote-unquote turret is out on the field. I am only using those support characters as elemental reactors. Those kind of characters would want elemental mastery. Here's the thing though that most people don't get. You don't want to just stack elemental mastery on them because the stat is multiplicative with all attack bonuses. I want to go back real quick to using Shanling as an example again. Her bear deals more damage with increased attack. The reaction damage that the bear triggers will increase with more elemental mastery, but at the same time, elemental mastery scales off of her total attack bonus. So with that being said, you want to mix and match attack and elemental mastery artifacts and not just one or the other. Stamina is something you want to have a lot of for exploration and for combat. Attacking, dodging, sprinting, climbing, and gliding all use stamina. You are able to increase max stamina by finding Animoculus and Geoculus from all over the world and offering them to the Statue of the Seven. Crit rate and crit damage are two pieces in pod, so I will talk about them together. These two stats are found in many other games, and the math behind it and concept are all the same. If there's some sort of imbalance going on with these two stats, then you might end up with diminishing returns. I guess I should explain what they do first. Crit rate is the rate that your character will land bonus damage, and crit damage determines the amount of bonus damage that will be dealt. To get the most out of these two stats, you want to have 1% crit rate for every 10% crit damage. That is just how it is for every game because of the math behind it. Now, if you're still in the early to mid game, then I wouldn't worry too much about these two stats because there are other stats to worry about. More likely than not, you're probably at that point in the game where you cannot get enough crit rate or crit damage to make it worth it without sacrificing attack. Healing bonus and incoming healing bonus, what they do is in the name. More healing bonus increases the amount that your character heals allies. Incoming healing bonus is the other way around. The more of that will determine the amount of heals that your character is receiving from allies. Energy recharge determines how quickly the elemental burst will fill. Elemental burst is basically a character's ultimate skill. Whenever you attack enemies, you're going to charge your ultimate, and you'll also pick up elemental particles and elemental orbs along the way. Energy recharge is going to help increase the fill rate from all of those sources. Reduced cooldown is related to a character's skill. The higher the cooldown percent, then the lower cooldown the character's skills will be. Powerful shield determines the amount of extra damage can be absorbed with elemental shields. Now, all of these stats on the bottom are considered elemental damage bonus and elemental resistance. Elemental damage bonus is one of the best stats for DPS characters. The main reason is because elemental damage bonus is multiplicative in the damage formula, so even low percentages of it will add a ton to a character's damage. Elemental resistance just determines how much less damage you will receive from that particular element. I know that's pretty much it for stats, but I want to spit out some additional information before we head into the next segment. First off, elemental skills and bursts scale off of attack unless the skill says otherwise, and they are able to crit. Elemental reaction damage is based on the character that is triggering the reaction. It scales off of that character's level and their elemental mastery. There's only two elemental reactions in this game that can crit, and they are Melt and Vaporize. Okay, now let's get into artifacts. So when you look at artifacts, you can see that they have a main stat, substats, and stat piece bonuses. The higher the rarity, then the more substats the artifacts will have and can get. Artifacts can get more substats when they gain levels, but there is a limit. There's 5 different artifact pieces from left to right, and there's the flower, feather, timepiece, goblet, and the hat. The flower will always give flat HP as a main stat, while the feather always grants flat attack. Generally speaking, for main DPS characters in the early to mid game, you want to look for either attack percent or elemental damage bonus from the goblet. Elemental damage bonus is usually preferred because of how it scales. The timepiece and the hat is where you have multiple options. With those 2 pieces, you usually want to look for attack percent. Elemental mastery can be okay depending on the character and their role on the team. And crit damage percent is something you want to look for way later in the game once you have a better weapon and your characters have good base stats from being very high leveled. Do not worry too much about set piece bonuses in the early game. Just focus on getting good main stats and substats, especially main stats for your artifacts. If you do have a good main stat artifact and they also fulfill a set piece bonus, then great. By all means use them. But don't go out of your way to make a set piece bonus using bad main stat artifacts, alright? As for recommendations for early game set piece bonuses, I would recommend the Berserker 2-piece bonus. That one usually is a good one to use in the early to mid game because it gives you extra crit. There's also a few 2-piece bonuses that give attack percent. If I recall correctly, there's Gladiators, Exiled, and I think Sojourners. Those are going to be good options as well. In the early game, make sure that you prioritize in leveling up the feather first. Like I said, when you start out, you're going to be very low leveled, obviously. You're just going to have very low base attack character wise and weapon wise, so attack percent won't do much if your base attack is really low. Flat attack is going to be more helpful at that point, but the farther you get into the game, then the attack percent becomes a lot more better. Eventually, attack percent will sort of fall off, and that's when crit damage percent and elemental damage bonus becomes the priority damage stat. But that's way later once your character is near max and are equipped with a really good weapon. And by the way, for those that are wondering, no, the flat attack from the feather is not taken into account with attack percent from artifacts. Attack percent is additive to the total base attack from only the character and the weapon. The feather's flat attack is added afterwards. And yeah, I think that's where we're going to stop for today. I know that's a lot of digest, but as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.